This is an Olympia Maximatic HX espresso machine, and it seems fairly complicated on the surface of it, but actually it's pretty simple. I've got its dress off so we can look at the various components of it. There's very few seals that it requires to do a complete rebuild of the machine, but they're a little complicated to get at, not really too bad. The hard ones are on the top. I'll just take a little tour here to see what's replaceable. Of course, in here we have the sight glass, and there's a seal at the top and a seal at the bottom. In order to change the sight glass seal, this whole front panel has to come off, and it's really not too hard. You don't even have to unhook the wires to get it off. There's a replaceable copper crush washer here. This is the pressure safety release valve. As we move around, we've got the fresh water tank, which feeds the heat exchanger. There are two O-ring seals in the bottom cup of the tank. As you know, if you use one of these machines or know anything about it, it is removable, and it's easier to remove it when there's no water in it, but let me pull that off of there. It's got a brand new seal. There's a big O-ring here, and there's an O-ring against the plastic body. That just plugs right in, back in there. There's two O-rings there. As we travel around, the most complicated aspect of the machine is up here at the heat exchanger and the three-way valve. The heat exchanger is a tube that fits down inside of the boiler. As you can see, the machine is hot and running. I've got a pressure test gauge on it to set the pressure stat. But this part right here, you can see it. Under this large nut, there's a single O-ring that seals the heat exchanger at the top. Now, this part here, this square block, contains two small O-rings that are sandwiched between the two pieces of metal. The simplest way to deal with this part here is you loosen this fitting, you loosen this fitting, the entire piece will come down in your hand, and these screws can be removed from the side with a pair of pliers or a round the corner screwdriver if you've got the proper sized one. But they're just flathead screws. You take it apart, change those O-rings. While you have this part down, the three-way valve, you then take a large wrench, loosen this nut, and you can address the O-ring that seals this top boss. It's really a pretty easy job to do. It's just a little frustrating because all of these fittings have to be aligned just right for reassembly. Now, so as not to tie my cord in a big knot, we'll come back around. Very easy to replace this piece of silicone tube, which sometimes gets a little bit aged. This is on the vibrational pump that's on the back. We come around to the front. The group comes off with 4 cap screws here, and there's an O-ring seal between the group and the back plate, which is right up against the boiler, as a matter of fact. And of course there's a group gasket up in the portafilter that's very easy to change because this has the type of group that has a screw-in screen. Don't know if you can see it. And there is an O-ring and a bib washer in the steam valve, just like an Olympia Cremina. There's another O-ring up in here in the swivel that fits down around the tube. This one's a very simple one to change. To service the steam wand on this machine actually is a pleasure to do because it works so well once it's done. Here's another piece that's replaceable at fairly low cost. This flexible silicone drain tube that comes from the three-way valve. I went ahead on this machine and changed the boiler gasket, which is underneath. I wanted to scour out the boiler. By peering down inside, I could see that it had a black covering on the inside of the boiler. Richard Penny thinks that this is a result of using a high iron water that causes the black coating. He might be right. He's been right about an awful lot of things. But as you can see, once we're up and running, the HX machine, Olympia Maximatic, a pleasure to use, very easy to repair and rebuild with a minimal number of seals, and probably a couple of hours of your time over the period of about 3 days is about all you need to do a really good job completely rebuilding the machine.